It seems like I've got a trend going with actors who disappear into complex roles that are vastly different from each other. So to complete what I'm going to call the Chameleon trilogy, let's talk about Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce is an English actor who has proven time and again to be one of the best actors of his generation. Throughout his career, he's portrayed an Australian policeman, an American businessman, a King of England, and he also had an unforgettable cameo in The Road. But which movies contain his best performances? Well, as of February 2014, here are my top 5. Number 5. Lawless. Throughout his career, Guy Pearce has played some very villainous characters, but very few of those villains have been as over the top as Charlie Rakes from Lawless. Even though it's supposedly based on a true story, it's hard to take Lawless 100% seriously. Its characters and plot are very hyperbolic, but then again, what do you expect from a Prohibition story set in the backcountry hills of the US? These characters allow the actors to have a field day, especially Guy Pearce. Charlie Rakes is a man of the law who wants to destroy the Bondurant brothers and their illegal alcohol operation. Pearce plays him as a germophobic fop with a taste for cruelty and violence. Now I suppose that I should point out the insensitive stereotype that Charlie Rakes belongs to in the history of film characters. But in defense of Guy Pearce, he knows what sort of character he's playing and he embraces it completely. Pearce transforms his usual appearance to portray this character, even as he's allowed to overact to his heart's content. And he ended up being the most memorable part of the movie. Whether it's insensitive or not, it probably is, but my point is, Pearce took the role he was given and ran with it. And since we're looking strictly at performances here, I think Guy Pearce should be commended for what he was able to do. Number 4. The Count of Monte Cristo. For anybody who doesn't know this story, it's based on a book by the same name, written by Alexandre Dumas. It's a sweeping tale of betrayal, hardship, and ultimately, revenge. Guy Pearce is the son of Count Mondego, friends with Edmond Dantes until he stabs him in the back for profit. But there's more to it than that. Mondego and Edmond both desire the same woman. Also, Mondego's pride and bloated self-worth antagonizes him against the common-born Edmond. And so he thinks little of sending Edmond to a hellish prison for the rest of his life. All of this sets Mondego up as the main villain of the piece, and Pearce plays the part wonderfully. Therefore, when Edmond escapes to prepare his cruel vengeance, we're on his side, even as he punishes those who did him wrong. From his pompous scowl down to his condescending arrogance, Pearce gives us a greedy and selfish man who does terrible things, not because he's evil, but because of his sense that he's better than the rest of humanity by virtue of his birth. It's what dictates his actions, even when they'll lead him to utter ruin. Pearce gave us a villain who was evil enough to hate, but grounded enough to be realistic. It helped make the movie work as an adaptation of such a sweeping tale. Number 3. Memento. Before Iron Man 3, this was the movie that Guy Pearce was best known for. Guy Pearce is Leonard, the man with short-term memory loss on a hunt for his wife's killer. The movie plays with how a story can be told, and its twists never fail to impress audiences, even now. Leonard is an interesting character in that we constantly learn more about him and his motivations. He's also hampered by his memory loss, but his methods of getting around it are creative and interesting. As he deals with people for the first time on a regular basis, the fact that he truly can never know them adds to the mystery of who's lying to him and who's genuinely trying to help. It's one of the few times that Guy Pearce has played the lead in a movie, and as we'll see from the next 2 picks on the list, I think Pearce deserved to have become a leading man in the same class as Leo DiCaprio and Matt Damon. Certainly he's just as good of an actor as them, if not better, as Memento clearly shows. Number 2. The Proposition. It just occurred to me that John Hillcoat is one of the most underrated directors working today. And the fact that I've mentioned 3 of his movies in this video show just how much of his collaborations with Guy Pearce have paid off. But it's their first big team-up that I want to talk about. The Proposition is one of the darkest movies I've ever seen. It's an Australian Western noir set in the unforgiving outback during the 19th century. Guy Pearce is Charlie Burns, the middle brother of 3 Irish criminals. At the start of the film, Charlie is told that if he wants to save Mikey from the death penalty, he's got to find his older brother Arthur and kill him. And so Charlie embarks on a journey that's as captivating and bleak as Heart of Darkness. When he finally finds his older brother, Arthur has changed so much that it's as though Charlie, like the audience, is seeing Arthur for the first time. And just like us, he's disturbed by what he sees. Charlie struggles between his hatred for Arthur's psychotic behavior and his inability to ever stand up to him. And despite the unbelievable performances by John Hurt, Emily Watson, Danny Huston, and Ray Winstone, Guy Pearce manages to hold his own as the main character of the story. The fact that he was able to hold his own against these powerhouses is a very admirable feat. But if you're aware of the first film on my list, you'll know that he's done this kind of thing before. So without further ado, my number 1 Guy Pearce performance would have to be in the film L.A. Confidential. This is possibly the closest that Pearce has gotten to playing the shining hero of a film. But Ed Exley is far more interesting than that. Exley wants to be, even sees himself as the shining hero of the story, and he's going to bring down LA's corruption or else die in the attempt. He makes for an excellent foil to the slimy Jack Vincent and the brutal Bud White. Exley is unafraid to rat out his fellow police officers, even if it makes him the most hated police officer in the department. It's because he's the crusader who's going by the rules. And honestly, I can really respect him for that. Sure, he's got a stick up his butt about it, and some suspect he's only doing it to get his name in the paper, but what really drives him is his sense of justice, and nobody, not even fellow police officers, are excluded from being punished. Of course, Ed ends up having to make uneasy alliances with his former enemies, and he takes actions that go against his ideals, but his character's journey is partly why I loved this film so much. Unlike Daniel Day-Lewis or Edward Norton, Guy Pearce has never been nominated for an Oscar. And if I had to pick his biggest snub, I would say it was this movie. Ed Exley was my favorite character in the film, and he was the most interesting character that Guy Pearce has ever played, at least so far. Because that's the thing with Guy Pearce. Whether he's in the spotlight or not, chances are he's always somewhere doing some kind of interesting performance. I think that's why he never really became a leading man to the equivalent of DiCaprio or Damon or even Mark Wahlberg. He seems far more content to be a character actor, kind of like what Edward Norton is doing now. I mean, it's made him somewhat of a household name for film buffs, and just last year he was in a huge blockbuster. Whether he wants to capitalize on that is up to him, but either way, he's one of my favorite actors working right now.